The movie begins with a man waiting impatiently for someone as a car pulls up to him. Upon entering the vehicle, his companion swiftly pulls out a gun and points it at his head. A shot is fired, but it takes down the driver instead, saving the man's life. In an unexpected twist, we learn that the shooter is Jimmy Bobo, an experienced hitman with an extensive criminal record. The man he just rescued turns out to be a police officer. It's not every day you see a criminal coming to the aid of policemen, and Jimmy himself admits that it's not his usual way of operating. However, there are moments when one must do the right thing, regardless of their usual principles. With this, Jimmy reveals the series of events that led to this unlikely partnership. In a flashback scene, we see him arriving at a hotel alongside his associate, Louis Blanchard. They approach a room occupied by Hank Greely, a former policeman who denies them entry. Although they try to deceive him by showing a police badge, Greely insists on a legal search warrant instead. Unable to persuade him, they forcibly break into the room and kill him. Afterward, they head to a bar to relax with some drinks. Meanwhile, another hitman named Keegan keeps an eye on them from afar. When he spots Louis alone, he makes his way through the crowd and stabs him. He then locates Jimmy in the restroom, leading to a fierce brawl between them. Despite Keegan's attempt to eliminate both of them, his plan ultimately fails, so he flees the bar, leaving Jimmy to find his partner's lifeless body on the floor. Following this, the story shifts to Detective Taylor Kwon, the man rescued by Jimmy. He arrives at the local police department to contribute to the ongoing investigation into Greely's murder case. It is then revealed that Greely was dismissed from the police force for stealing evidence from a case, although the details of the evidence remains unknown. Taylor then receives information suggesting Greely's potential connection to a local criminal, Baby Jack Lemoyne. Next, Taylor is informed about Louis's murder occurring just a couple hours after Greely's. Upon conducting a background check, he discovers Louis's extensive criminal record and his association with Jimmy Bobo. This leads Taylor to suspect that the two collaborated in Greely's murder. However, LeBreton prevents him from actively participating in the investigation, insisting that it's the responsibility of the local city police to resolve the matter. A few days later, Taylor contacts Jimmy and introduces himself, suggesting that Louis's murder might be connected to Greely's. He arranges a meeting at a nearby bar to discuss the matter further. During their encounter, he reveals that he wants to uncover the people responsible for the two murders. He then implies that these culprits might owe Jimmy money and suggests they team up to pursue these leads together. However, Jimmy declines the offer. As Taylor leaves the bar, he finds himself pursued by two unknown men, leading to a tense altercation with one of them in a parking lot. After fatally shooting his attacker, he searches the man's belongings and discovers a badge from the local city police force. While distracted, Taylor becomes the target of gunfire from the attacker's partner, leaving him unable to defend himself. Taking cover between parked cars, Taylor dodges further shots as the gunman continues to fire at him. Suddenly, a car violently runs the gunman over, and behind the wheel is none other than Jimmy. Following this, Jimmy offers to help him with his injuries, leading Taylor to get into the car with him. Almost instantly, both men aim their guns at each other, cautious of the other's presence. Jimmy then presents him with two options: either go along with him to receive medical attention, or exit the car and face the arriving authorities. After some thought, Taylor decides to join him, and together they quickly flee the scene. Elsewhere, Keegan pays a visit to his boss, Robert Morel, who criticizes him for leaving unfinished business the previous night. Morel's lawyer, Marcus Baptiste, reveals that Greely tried to blackmail them and turned the evidence file over to the local mobster, Baby Jack, for safekeeping. It turns out that an informant within his crew had revealed the file's location, which contains incriminating details of Morel's illegal activities. Keegan is then ordered to eliminate the file by any means necessary. Meanwhile, Jimmy arrives at his daughter Lisa's tattoo studio to ask for her help in attending to Taylor's injuries. Aware of the risks involved in going to a hospital, he decides to take Lisa's 1 year of medical school training to address the wounds. Simultaneously, Taylor remains in the car and contacts LeBreton to provide an update on his investigation. During this conversation, it becomes apparent that he's just using Jimmy as a means to reach the people who hired him to kill Greely, intending to arrest him once he identifies the main culprit. Lisa successfully removes the bullet lodged in his shoulder and stitches the wound. Meanwhile, Keegan pays a visit to baby Jack at his hideout and eliminates him along with his associates. He then retrieves the evidence file from the safe and delivers it to Morel. After leaving the studio, Taylor asks Jimmy about who ordered Greely's murder. It turns out that hitmen typically receive contracts through a middleman, known in this case as Ronnie Earl. After a background check, they receive a new lead suggesting that Earl has recently used his credit card at a bathhouse. Upon arriving at the bathhouse, Jimmy confronts Earl about potentially setting them up, which resulted in Louis's death. However, he denies these accusations and eventually reveals the man behind the contract, Baptiste, the corrupt lawyer. As tensions escalate, they get into a brutal fight that ends in Jimmy fatally shooting Earl. Next, Taylor collaborates with his own police department to gather info on Baptiste's whereabouts. With the information in hand, he accompanies Jimmy to the lawyer's mansion. Upon arrival, they find that he's hosting a costume party, providing them with an opportunity to infiltrate undetected. They then buy costume masks from a nearby store and successfully gain entry to the party. While scouring the crowd in search of Baptiste, Jimmy spots Keegan and recognizes him as the man responsible for Louis's murder. Later on, Jimmy discovers Baptiste alone in the restroom and knocks him out cold. With Taylor's help, they abduct Baptiste from his own mansion and transport him to his secret boathouse for interrogation. Meanwhile, Morel becomes aware of the situation and berates Keegan for allowing it to occur under his watch. Detective Town, a corrupt local officer, suggests tracking Baptiste via the GPS chip in his phone. But Keegan warns that the rescue operation might be challenging. As Morel destroys the evidence file, he directs him to prioritize eliminating the kidnappers and asserts that everything else, including Baptiste, is of secondary importance. In the meantime, Taylor interrogates Baptiste about Earl and their dealings, but he denies any knowledge of him. He warns him about the severe consequences he could face if his involvement in illegal activities is exposed. But Baptiste remains unfazed by the threats. Then Jimmy takes his turn to talk to him and learns that Keegan is a former mercenary who now serves Morel. It's revealed that Morel ordered Greely's murder since he was conducting a secret investigation into him. Moreover, he set Jimmy and Louis up to eliminate any potential links to the murder. Eventually, they force Baptiste into surrendering a flash drive containing detailed evidence of Morel's corruption scheme. He then discloses that he retained a copy of this incriminating evidence as insurance against any attempts by Morel to outsmart him. The evidence exposes payoff and bribes involving government officials, aiming to replace low-income housing projects with upscale luxury apartment units. With the information and flash drive secured, Jimmy then kills Baptiste as revenge for his role in Louis's death. However, Taylor becomes infuriated by his actions and threatens to arrest him once the case comes to an end. Meanwhile, Keegan and his men trace Baptiste's phone to the boathouse. They then launch a brutal attack, but Jimmy and Taylor manage to flee through the back door and into the lake. Upon reaching the land, Jimmy activates a remote detonator, setting off the bomb he had previously planted in the boathouse. This unexpected explosion kills the other men, while Keegan jumps into the lake and narrowly escapes death. Following the chaotic events, Jimmy and Taylor head to Lisa's apartment, catching her off guard. Using her computer, Taylor searches through the contents of the flash drive obtained from Baptiste. It reveals incriminating evidence exposing Morel's extensive network of corrupt dealings, including payouts to various local officials such as politicians, lawyers, and judges. Later on, he manages to contact LeBreton and reveals Morel as the mastermind behind the murder case. Arriving at the port, Taylor reveals that they need to go their separate ways temporarily, as he has to meet with LeBreton to share his findings. When Jimmy asks about their plan for dealing with Morel, He insists on arresting him, regardless of the army of lawyers he may assemble for his defense during the trial. Meanwhile, Jimmy leans towards a more aggressive approach and reveals his plan to kill Morel himself. However, he assures Taylor that he'll take care of the situation his own way. This angers Taylor once again, and he threatens to arrest him once Morel is thrown in jail. Elsewhere, Town informs Morel about the details he shared with Keegan. He reveals that the man they're pursuing, Jimmy, has a daughter who represents his only family. Morel decides to allow Keegan to utilize this information as he sees fit, with the intention of eliminating him once the case concludes. However, Town tries to sway his decision by highlighting Keegan's unique value to their operations. On the other hand, Morel admits his lack of trust in Keegan and hesitates to continue working with him. Yet, Town urges him to carefully reconsider this idea. Following this, Keegan arrives at Lisa's tattoo studio and insists on speaking to her outside. When she refuses, he resorts to violence and knocks her senseless before abducting her. In the meantime, Taylor waits for LeBreton, who eventually arrives in his car. As they begin to talk, he reveals that Greely and Louis fell victim to the same group led by Morel. But before he can speak any further, LeBreton unexpectedly pulls out a gun and aims it at his head. Suddenly, a shot is fired and strikes down LeBreton, just as seen in the opening scene of the movie. The shooter is revealed to be Jimmy, who once again comes to Taylor's rescue after finding out that the lieutenant was also on Morel's payroll. Afterward, Jimmy receives a call from Keegan, who informs him that he has something of value to him. He then allows Lisa to speak, revealing that he had abducted her. He proposes to exchange Lisa for the flash drive they obtained from Baptiste and provides him with the address. Later on, Jimmy finds himself alone facing Morel, Keegan, and Town at the location. When Morel asks about the policeman, he proposes to track him down in exchange for payment. After negotiations, they settle on a fee of $250,000 to eliminate Taylor. Morel commands his henchmen to bring out Lisa, but refuses to release her until he obtains the flash drive. Upon inspecting the drive and confirming its contents, he releases Lisa to her father. As they leave, Keegan confronts Morel regarding the payment of $250,000 to Jimmy, equal to his own fee. However, Morel asserts that he had more leverage in the situation. Enraged, Keegan guns down Town and several other henchmen surrounding Morel before ultimately taking him out. As Keegan makes his way out of the building, he takes down everyone who crosses his path. Meanwhile, Taylor covertly enters the building, also eliminating several henchmen as he progresses. Simultaneously, Jimmy and Lisa come down the building in an attempt to escape. Spotting Keegan in the distance, Jimmy quickly hides his daughter and pursues him. However, he encounters additional henchmen who open fire on him. Taking cover, he uses a remote detonator to activate the bomb in his car, swiftly killing the attackers. Elsewhere, a henchman tries to attack Lisa, but Taylor intervenes just in time and shoots down the assailant. Ultimately, Jimmy and Keegan, both professional hitmen, go in for a fierce showdown. Their confrontation escalates into a brutal axe fight, with Jimmy gaining the upper hand by fatally stabbing him in the throat with Louis's knife. Then, Taylor intervenes just in time and kills Keegan with a precise shot from a distance. Afterward, Taylor retrieves the flash drive while Jimmy shoots him in the shoulder to make it seem as if he failed to capture him. He then leaves the scene while Lisa stays with Taylor. As news of the incident surfaces, the story circulated is that the criminals turned on each other out of greed and killed each other. 6 weeks later, Taylor meets Jimmy at a bar and assures him that he won't pursue him for his past actions. However, he warns him that if he returns to a life of crime and breaks the law again, he will personally make sure of his downfall. The movie comes to an end as Jimmy welcomes the challenge and drives off into the night in his sweet new ride.